Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of our Tales from Tech Support. In today's episode, 2 laptops on top of beer kegs. I use Zoom every day. We love this user but dreaded her calls. Before we get started, make sure to subscribe so you will never miss a video. So let's get started. 2 laptops on top of beer kegs. The post about beta testing in the field made me remember something that happened to me about 20 years ago. At that time my company worked with a rewards vendor I will call Bigger Rewards. They were a little clunky, had a relatively limited selection but very reliable. Things didn't break very often. Then one day a communique went out that we were migrating away from them to a company I will call Bungles. They were supposedly a lot more flexible, and internet native, offered a very appealing website that was intuitive to use, etc. etc. So we migrated over. Shortly after the migration I heard how their pitch meeting went. Bungles had some issues with their deck during the pitch, but they fixed those fairly quickly. The site also had some technical issues, but they explained those away. They also admitted that we would be one of their first clients, and that their company was relatively new. They characterized themselves as a startup that was internet built from the ground up, lots of buzzwords, etc. The technical folk were unimpressed. The company seemed young and immature. The business folks were also not impressed due to the flubs before and during their presentation. They weren't polished and didn't seem ready for a big contract like ours. Then Bungles mentioned their cost, which was easily well under half of Big Rewards. And the website was actually quite appealing with a bigger selection than Big Rewards. And they did seem hungry for the business and were clearly full of hustle. And this internet thing did seem to be taking off. So management decided to give them our business. We switched over. I think the reasoning was, how bad can it be for more than half off? I and a few others were put in charge of supporting the product post-migration. We concluded rather quickly that the training from Bungles and all their available documentation was worthless. It was almost always inadequate or misleading. So I spent the next 4 to 6 months accumulating an internal library of tips and tricks and troubleshooting guides. We needed it as things were constantly breaking or behaving in unexpected ways. What particularly drove us mad were moments we began referring to as the lady vanishes. We would see an error or some kind of flaw and report it to Bungles support. They would turn right around and deny it ever existed. We would check, and of course by then it would be fixed. Some of our developers started laughing up their sleeves and implying "told you so." I heard one of them say that Bungles was clearly 2 or 3 people working in a garage on laptops balanced on top of beer kegs. At one point things got so bad that we staged a mutiny. If I remember correctly, that was the day someone wanted to return something. What they got via rewards was the wrong size and color. But Bungles didn't have a formal return process at the time. We also had 2 lady vanishes that day. That was the last straw. I bought some pirate flags and we all put them on top of our desks and began talking like pirates. My flag was 5 feet wide on a pole that almost touched the ceiling. It could be seen from almost anywhere on our floor. We even sent a demand letter to our manager. I wanted to do it in red ink or blood on parchment paper. But my fellow mutineers chickened out, so we sent her an email. But it did have the word mutiny in the subject line, and a JPG of a skull and crossbones in the email signature. Our manager promised to look into it and, to her credit, both took us seriously and tolerated our pirate nonsense. Her largesse, I'm sure, was made easier since we all kept doing our jobs as best we could. This was a civilized mutiny by pirates who sometimes brought donuts to the office. I know that she complained to the powers that be. The lack of a competent return process made her jaw drop, but nothing changed from management. Eventually Bungles straightened some things out. They improved to the point of just being bad, but not criminally bad. In fact, I think Bungles is still the rewards vendor for my old company. After all, they are pretty cheap, and that's all that matters sometimes. I still have the pirate flag. I turned it into a cape for one of my kids. Update: I forgot to mention a similar situation that happened years later which really cemented in my mind my experience with Bungles. I was still with the company then, but didn't support Bungles anymore. In this case, my company had promised the moon and the stars to a very big, very VIP, very demanding client. The result failed to meet most of the goals and the client was quite frustrated. I was a little concerned as supporting them was something of a step up for me, and I was struggling to make them happy. On a client visit a few months into the contract, I went out to lunch with my contact. I tried to be somewhat transparent about what we could and could not do, which she seemed to appreciate. Then at the end of the lunch she casually mentioned that switching to us saved them a great deal of money. After that I stopped worrying. It turns out we were pretty cheap, and that's all that matters sometimes. I use Zoom every day. My company allows customers to vote on future company policy. Like everything over the past 14 months, COVID has made the process remote and slightly more complicated. I was not a part of the decision-making as I am a lowly peon, but for some reason we outsourced rather than jury/jerry-rigging our own solution for online meeting and voting. The company we used is essentially Zoom that is a lot harder to use, prone to glitches, and merely adds a voting function while actually using Zoom as the backbone. The rules for this includes Windows, Chrome or Edge only, everything else will glitch out. Mac, Edge only, everything else will glitch out. Linux, who? Mobile devices, no way Jose. Clear instructions with the most common glitches and questions were sent out via email, and were dutifully ignored, leading to a lot of extra calls. For the most part the process had been boring and mildly aggravating. Thankfully the day before each meeting we had the phone line open for 2 to 3 hours, so that customers can test their connections and call in to fix any issue they're having. Which helped a lot with cutting down on frivolous calls the day of the meetings. Essentially teaching grandma how to get on a Zoom call with some minor extra complexity. Of course, the last call I take on the last customer meeting is about 30 minutes before the 10-minute voting process starts. Ring ring dash. Me, Helpdesk, this is Absent speaking. El Presidente, EP, this is F and underscore ing stupid. Me, I'm sorry. EP, I use Zoom every goddamn day. Why the F underscore, 8 did y'all set it up this way? Customer service voice deactivated, dash. Me, what's the problem, and can I please have your name and ID for the meeting? EP, my name? My name is Goddard MNEP, I'm the elected leader of this customer conference. Me, unless your name is president of the company, that's not true, and he has my direct line. Can I have your name please? EP, name. Me, thank you, now what seems to be the problem EP? EP, I use Zoom every single day, and I can't figure this SH1 Plus out. Me, what do you see? EP, nothing, I see a bunch of nothing. Me, so the computer is off? EP, no. I just don't see nothing. I should see something. This is Zoom .NIT, and I use it every day. Why isn't this simple? Why is company so stupid? We've got old idiots here, and they're expecting us to do all this crap, when we should only have to click on AF underscore plus ing link. COVID-riddled cough comes from the background dash. Me. Did you open your email and click on the meeting link? EP, yes, I did, and now I don't see nothing. Me, nothing at all? The computer screen is black? EP, well no. I don't see anything in the Zoom meeting. Me, do you see instructions page description? EP, yes, and I see nothing on the side that's supposed to be Zoom. I use it every day, I don't get it. Me, what browser are you using? EP, I don't know. -7 minutes of trying to figure out what browser he is using by going to whatsmybrowser.org. EP is unable to figure it out. EP, are you telling me that my 8K Mac computer can't run Zoom? Because that's AF_ plus ing lie. Me, oh, you have a Mac. Are you using Safari? EP, yeah, Safari, that's it. Me, the email we sent out said that you would need to use Microsoft Edge if you were using a Mac computer. EP, how do I do that? Me, if you Google how to install Edge on a Mac computer, you'll find lots of resources that will walk you through step by step. EP, what I just type in Edge? Me, go to Google and type in how to install Edge on Mac. Wasting more time, I eventually email him a link to the Edge install page for Mac computers and walk him through the process. EP, okay, it's installed, but where is it? Me, I don't honestly know. Every computer I support is Windows based, and I don't use Apple products. EP, can you remote into my computer and do this for me? Me, are you a company employee? EP, no. Me, no. EP, do you have an iPhone? Me, no. EP, hold on, I'm getting a call from regional sales representative. I can hear their entire conversation. First thing the RSR asked, did you call the helpline? He then walked through the basic troubleshooting with EP, which wouldn't work because the basic troubleshooting assumes that customers are using Windows machines. After wasting another 10 minutes getting nowhere and bad-mouthing me, EP returns to the phone. EP, he wasn't any help. But see, I'm important to this meeting and I use Zoom every day, so this should be simple. I've got 5 other members here who can't use computers and need my help, and we can't get into this darn meeting. Me, do you have 6 computers available for them to vote? EP, no. Me. Thunk, do you know how to open multiple tabs on a browser? Thunk. EP, to do what? Me, Thunk. Long as this is, I'm gonna skip some, this after I get him back into Safari, because while he couldn't see the meeting, the voting portion would still work. I had him call into the meeting so the 5 other members could listen into the voting options. I was then painstakingly trying to explain how tabs work. When, by the grace of God in the highest, EP finally found his install of Edge, and was able to get into the meeting proper. There were 2 minutes left for voting, and he still needed to connect 5 more tabs. Go get everyone to vote. EP, thanks for your help, Absinthe. I got a bit frustrated there and got mad and took it out on you. Thanks for being a good sport. But seriously, I use Zoom every day and this was just aggravating. Me, have a wonderful rest of your weekend. Click dash. Thunk. We loved this user but dreaded her calls. This was a lot of years back, so memory is a bit fuzzy. I've written what I could remember and surmised the rest. Many years ago, I was working for a small company that supported nonprofits. We had software that helped them track their donors, thank them for donations, and figure out which future campaigns were likely to appeal to them. It was a fun job. Telephone tech support, but every day I was helping open libraries, keeping missionaries supplied, curing cancer. Callers were generally less technical than business callers would be, but they were almost all earnest and polite. This is the only tech support job I've worked where I was never once sworn at. One of our customers was an interesting case. She ran a museum with a huge mailing, like I think it was just north of 6 million donors, which was 3 or 4 orders of magnitude larger than our average user. She was also genius-level brilliant. She could make our software do things that the programmers swore could not be done. I'll call her Mariko here. Then she got brain cancer. A long time went by. She beat the cancer with chemo and surgery, but cancer at that level does not go quietly. She lived and recovered, but she had lost her brilliant edge, and she had symptoms like somebody with a moderate TBI, emotional, sometimes erratic, easily confused. She would call up asking us to help her do something that she was sure she'd done before. Sometimes she had. If she'd done it with us, we could pull the logs and help her through it. But sometimes she had just powered through on her own, and it would take us a few hours on the phone to recreate it. And sometimes she hadn't done it before because it was not possible with the software. Our usual calls were 10 to 20 minutes long and low-key. Mariko's calls, when she came back, were never under an hour. During the call, she would often be frustrated enough to cry. Sometimes we would too. She tried so bloody hard. It was heartbreaking to see how she struggled, but it was also uplifting. This woman had come back from a situation that I would dread, and through sheer hard work, was doing the job that she'd done 30 IQ points ago. She called me one day asking me to help her figure out why our software wasn't searching through all the names. If I recall correctly, it only searched donors with last names starting with A through J. I tried her exact query on our test database, which had 60 users, not 6 million, and it worked fine. Proxied into her computer, and saw that the problem did indeed exist. No error message, it just returned users from the first part of the alphabet. I obviously couldn't experiment on her live database. Older call records showed that having her burn the data to a heap of CDs and send it to us took about 3 weeks. The boneheaded tech who had written that ticket hadn't thought to keep the data. So I was stuck with no way to test the software in the actual conditions under which it was being used. A classic "it works in my office" moment. I told Mariko that I was working on a solution and let her go. It's been a relatively short call for her, 40 minutes, but of course the issue was not yet solved. I'd just taken a Visual Basic class, version 6.0, if that gives you some idea of how long ago this was. So I put together a little script that I called Populator. It took random names from a list that I wrote of first names, last names, street names, etc. It generated a list of as many people as you wanted, in a CSV that our software could import. It wasn't perfect, since nobody on the list had any donations, but it was good enough to start. I entered 6 million in the quantity field, hit go, and left for the night. The next morning, my list was there. It took most of the day to import, but when it did, I could recreate her error. I documented it and grabbed a programmer. He watched the error happen and traced the logic. As you've probably suspected, the problem was that they hadn't planned on such a massive donor list. They'd used an integer for one of the registers. Not sure why it didn't error, but when it reached that number, it decided that the search was done. He changed it to a long and recompiled it. My test worked. So I got to call Mariko and tell her that we had fixed it, and the new release would go out next week, after testing. She was delighted. When the new release went out, I had to proxy in and install it for her, which we likely wouldn't have done for another user. Once it was installed, I started her database installing and told her that it would probably take overnight to import. Last call, on the next morning, we ran her query, and she got the whole list she needed. She sent us homemade peanut brittle the next week. Seriously nice lady.